We have Lokwan Tho, your friend, your very good friend, with whom you've gone on so many
Yes,
expeditions.
yes. Now he was the man on whom my influence, in the same way as Srezaman was on me, mine was on
On
Lokwanto,
Lokwan
because
Tho.
during the war he had to escape from Singapore when the Japs got there. And when he came to India, he was here just as a refugee. And a common friend brought me in touch with him. And I asked him what his interests were, and he said he was very keen on birds. So I said, well, I am going on an expedition to Kutch in 2 days' time. Would you like to come? Then he jumped at, he came along and with me for several months, and he developed into a first-class ornithologist. He was really very keen on bird photography, but in the course of that he did quite a lot of good work in Malaya when he went back.
Yes, at this time, while he was conducting his photography, you yourself were quite a good hand with the camera.
Yes, but I was not any class. I was all right. Now, at the present time, this animal photography has reached such a standard that I don't even want to admit that I am a photographer.
But perhaps would it be right to say that Lokwanto might have had some effect or some influence on
Yes,
your
yes, a great deal.
photographic capabilities
Yes,
as a
quite
photographer?
absolutely, because the meticulous detail, meticulous attention he paid to details was the thing that I learned from him. And that was the secret of why his photographs were so much, so much better than mine.
Well, the archives of the Bombay Natural History Society are filled with the evidence of his work and yours, and photography perhaps is one of the finest ways to share your pleasures which you've
Yes,
seen in the field
yes,
with others. So we are
yes,
grateful
it
to
was
Lokwanto. We have a giant in the field of ornithology today, Mr. S. Dillon Ripley. He's a man who you've worked very closely with for many, many years now.
yes,
We'd
he
like to know.
also, I came to know him during the war when he was just graduated from Yale or somewhere, and he joined the army and he was sent to Sri Lanka, to Ceylon. And he had to report now and again to the headquarters in Delhi. And in passing through, he always used to stop in Bombay for a day or so, and then we made our plans and discussed various things and so on. And that is how I came to know him.
From some of the adventures that he relates, you've had some hair-raising experiences. He talks of drinking elephant milk at some time and eating tiger meat on other occasions. And could
Yes.
you tell us something about perhaps some areas in which you've worked together in the
Well, we
field?
have worked together a lot, and our interest has been to find out how the bird life is changing with the changing of the environment. And all our thrust has been on those lines. So we have, wherever we have been there and then again repeated it after so many years and compared the conditions and so on.
The northeast of the country, I think you've covered quite well with him. You've been to Arunachal Pradesh and Bhutan specifically.
Yes, yes, there we have made several trips, and in Arunachal Pradesh, more or less pioneering work in birds.
In his capacity as the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution and yours as the president of the Bombay Natural History Society, you have, through your personal relationships and association, brought these two institutions together considerably in terms of cooperation and work. Perhaps,
Yes, I think this is quite true. And we have, both our institutions have profited in that way. And both our institutions in this particular work could not have done without each other's help. For instance, I had great help in the financial field from the Smithsonian and from Ripley's side. Before that, he was a professor at Yale, and then also we had several expeditions together. And then there are many places here in India where he himself would never have got permission to go, for sensitive areas near the frontier and eastern frontier. So in that way, the Natural History Society helped him to get the permission to enter there, and Natural History Society itself gained by having these expeditions financed and getting part of the material collected for our collection.
Quite. There have been a number of books that you have co-authored with him. Has there must have been a lot of work involved here in the writing of the manuscripts, on the rewriting of the manuscripts. Was much of this work done here, or was it
No,
done
well,
in
this was
America?
the thing, you see, because Ripley's strong point is taxonomy. And I am not really interested in taxonomy. And yet, if you wanted to make a book thoroughly scientific, you would have to have absolutely reliable taxonomical material in it. So we divided up the work. He did the taxonomical part, and I did the field and the ecological part. And for that, he got me a fellowship at Yale so that I could go and we could coordinate our work together and discuss and decide on the lines on which we were going to cooperate in that book. And that is how we were able to get a smooth running combination.
From this relationship, perhaps in terms of the published materials that have emerged, which publications would you hold out as being at the apex of your
I think
achievements?
actually it is the handbook because that's the most comprehensive book. But the writing of a book and the collecting material for that book, the one I enjoyed most is The Birds of Kerala because I had lived in Burma where I had I had been in similar evergreen and moist deciduous forests as in Travancore. But I never had opportunity of studying the birds in Burma very carefully. So when I got the opportunity here in Travancore at that time, I really enjoyed it very much.
Which year was this?
This was in 1932, 32, 33.
And 50 years later, the
Yes.
association goes strong. That's wonderful to hear. I wish all relationships grew and grew like these, like the one that you just. Humayun Abdul Ali.
Yeah.
Here's a man who you work with almost every
He
day
is
today.
another man who has been under my influence. When he was a college student, he used to come and spend his holidays with me in camp in Travancore in Hyderabad and so on. And that is where he himself admits that that is where he picked up the sort of tricks of the trade.
He again, of course, is a detailed man in terms of the
He is
morphology
a
and the.
very keen and very discerning ornithologist and very dedicated. He does some very good work.
The Zoological Survey of India has thrown up a number of individuals who stand out, particularly in terms of their ornithological work.
I think they have not been particularly strong in ornithological work because the director, if the director is interested in, say, fishes, then he encourages that more than anything else, and there has never been anyone who is particularly interested in ornithology. So that the man who has done really good work is Dr. Biswamai Biswas, who did it more or less without much encouragement from in fact, a certain amount of discouragement. But he's done very well indeed. And he is one of our best systematic ornithologists at the present time.
Did he help you?
Yes, there are many questions and many points on which I had to consult him.
What about Mr. J. C. Hupwood? He was with you in Burma.
Yes,
I'm
well,
not-
he was, that time it was the Imperial Forest Service. So he was in the Forest Service, he was the Divisional Forest Officer of Tavoy, where I was, Tenasserim. And I was quite a greenhorn at that time, just beginning my bird study career. And in Burma, I was absolutely at a loose end because there was no help, there were no books at the time, and so on. So I discovered that Hopwood was a very keen bird student and he was collecting birds and eggs for Stuart Baker when Stuart Baker was writing the second edition of the Fauna of British India series on birds. And Hopwood was very cooperative and very helpful to me at that time, because all that I knew about Burmese birds was from him. Unfortunately, he was then transferred, and then I had work on my own.
And you've had some adventures in Afghanistan with Colonel Hagen.
They were not really ventures, except that our trucks got overturned and so on several times. But the great thing in Afghanistan was the bird migration. We got there just at the right time when the birds were migrating, and it was something worthwhile seeing the thousands and thousands of birds passing through.
Yes, Afghanistan is on the flyway of so many migrating birds.
Yes.
One subject that comes up in your association with the colonel is, if I'm not mistaken, the effect of, say, sunlight on the coloration of birds.
Yes. Yes, he has done a lot. You see, his line of work was just after my own heart, so that we got on together very well with the work, because we had both had the same interest in the. And he had made a special study of the effect of light on the desert coloration of animals. So it is the same with the larks. If you collect the soil, the ground soil, and compare it with the birds collected on that soil, you will find that there is a very great resemblance to the color of the soil in the bird. And the same species occurring in a different area where the soil is yellow or grayish or some other color instead of this, you'll find that the birds living on it are also of that color.
Yes, it's quite remarkable. I mean, so many different people with so many different specializations have
Yes.
contributed to your evolution as an
Yes,
ornithologist.
yes, I
It's
think I had a wonderful opportunity of meeting these people and working with them. And I think there is usually such good camaraderie in ornithologists that it is really very refreshing to work. And that is so when you go to a new country and you are quite a stranger there. If you find somebody who is an ornithologist, he will immediately take you under his wing and make you at home there and so on. That is one of the things I have found in ornithology.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. I wish this were true of specialists in most other
Yes,
fields. One
yes,
keeps hearing of professional
yes,
jealousies and insecurities
yes,
and ego problems coming in the way
yes,
of constructive work. It's really very, very wonderful to hear this. Dr. David Lack, who was the director of the Edward Gray Institute, Field Ornithology at Oxford,
yes.
you've had.
Yes, he was a great friend of mine. He was a very high class ornithologist. Now, one thing about he and his wife made a special study of the swifts living in a tower in Oxford, living in a hole in a tower in the Oxford Museum, which is 100 feet high. And he and his wife used to go up and down the thing every day and sit there for hours watching it. When I visited Oxford, and he has written a book, a very, very good book called Swifts in a Tower. When I read that book and the work that they had done, and when I was in Oxford, I said I would like to see these nests. So he tried to dissuade me very much, because he said this is too high and too straight and so on. Oh, I was boasted like anything. I said we are used to that kind of thing in India, and I don't mind. I will climb up, and so on. So it was all. He said, "Well, I have warned you." Then he took me there, and it was a straight ladder with a little bit of landing at one place. Then the ladder continued, but it was so
Steep.
vertical that the sight of it was not very pleasing. But I had boasted so much that I would like to go up that I that I said I must now do this. So when I got up halfway and I looked down, about 50 feet, the ladder had no railing. You had to catch hold of the rungs and go up like that. It was an iron ladder, and when I looked down, my heart sank. If I was alone, I would have backed out. But he was looking at me from underneath. So I said, now I can't. So I had to grit my teeth and he did it. But I marveled to learn that they were doing it 3 or 4 times every day.
Your first doctorate student, I think, was referred to Dr. David Lack. Am I right? Was he the reference for your first?
Yes, yes, yes. That is what it is. When I had found that great difficulty in getting a proper systematic ornithological education here, and that is why I had to go to Germany. When I came back, I was feeling that our university should have some facilities for anybody, even one student in 100. If he is really interested, he should be given the opportunity. So I got the university to recognize the Bombay Natural History Society as a ornithological research institution for these MSc and PhD degrees. When I got my first student for MSc, that was a man called Ambedkar, who is now employed at the Natural History Society. He did a very good job on the weaver bird. I was directing his work, but I didn't know if I was directing him on the right lines. I was wanted to make sure myself. So I got the university as a special case to appoint Dr. Leck as the outside examiner. Usually for MSc they don't go to foreign examiners and so on, but in this case it was really a test for myself. And we got a very good report from Dr. Leck. He said this is equal to any of these British universities standard. It was very encouraging to me.
Well, the people who seem to have influenced your life extend to all corners of the globe. We've got the United Kingdom and Germany and America and Burma and Afghanistan and India. Could you tell us, Dr. Salim Ali, what about the current situation today? There are organizations, for instance, like the Crane Foundation, led by fairly eminent individuals, George Archibald, for instance.
Yes.
What are your associations with them? Do you exchange information? Do you?
Yes, we are always in touch, and their chief thing is to breed birds that are getting scarce or on the point of extinction and try and reintroduce them in the wild. And the Crane Foundation does that specially with the 15 or so species of cranes that are found in the world. And they were very keen on black-necked crane, which is getting quite rare. And as far I mean, we know nothing about what the status is in China, but the only part where it breeds within Indian limits is Ladakh, and they want very much to take some eggs and try and breed the birds there. But we have made them a counter offer that they should bring their staff to lay and try to rear these, to incubate the eggs and teach some of our people also the techniques of captive breeding. So they have agreed to do that. Now we are waiting to see how it works.
Dr. Salim Ali, most of the ornithological work that you've done has been done a number of years ago and has continued to be done in a tradition of a man trying to understand nature. Today, if one looks around, the evidence of high technology into the study of ornithology has become very evident. Are there any individuals or institutions with whom you've worked who have perhaps led you towards this trend in ornithology, the computerization, satellite tracking of migrations, things like that?
I have not had any personal contacts with the work that is being done. For instance, in the study of migration by radar and by in different other sophisticated means. But the general trend I find nowadays is too mathematical and too mechanical, so that one loses the interest in the bird itself, and you get a very, very clever mathematical solution to various things. But that sort of ornithology, I'm afraid, is too modern for us who have grown up in the old tradition and who really enjoyed ornithology because of its contact with birds. It has come to such a pass now that there are many projects or problems which can be solved without the interference of birds at all. You can get quantitative data on certain aspects of bird life without having much study to do of the bird itself and so on. Well, I am afraid that type of ornithology is too advanced for us old style workers who are interested really in the living bird in its natural habitat.
I think
So I am not much in touch with any of the actual workers now. Of course, I read the papers and so on in these ornithological journals, and that is what gives me the impression that this is not the type of work that I myself would prefer. And I feel that I have enjoyed my work and I don't enjoy this type of work. I don't try very hard to keep it up now.
there's a naturalist of high standing with whom you have had an association. This is Peter Scott. Could you tell us something about your association with him?
Yes, I know Peter. I've been very friendly with Peter Scott since 1950, when we have been on various ornithological congresses and so on together. And I think his is the type of work that I really appreciate, because that is all to do with living birds. And he's certainly an expert on waterfowl. And I'm glad that when he came to Bharatpur, he took so much interest and he gave a lot of suggestions of how it could be improved. And his saying that he has not seen as good a waterfowl sanctuary anywhere in the world means something, because he has really seen most of the important ones in the world. And he thinks that Bharatpur is a unique place.
As indeed it is, it's a living laboratory for so
Yes.
many ornithologists to
Yes.
come.
Yes.
Dr. Salim Ali, what about the young men you see around you today in India?
Ah.
Do any come to mind who you think might lead the ornithological?
I think that we have got a lot of very promising material. And now, for instance, the few young men who are working with the Bombay Natural History Society in our various projects, I think they are absolutely first-class people. And it is not only that I think so or we think so in India, but we have sent them to various international conferences and so on, and we have got very, very flattering reports. So I think that it is only opportunity that is wanted, and there is no reason why our young people should not be as proficient ornithologists as anywhere else, provided they have the opportunity. Of course, jobs are few, and amateurs can do a certain amount of work, but unless one is able to devote all one's time to a study, it is really difficult to achieve anything of outstanding importance.
Mr. Fateh Ali, who is now in Bangalore.
Zafar
Zafar.
Patel, yes. He is also one of my chelas, and he got his early interest from me, and he is very much interested. He's not a scientist, but he is very much interested in birds, and it is very creditable to him that he has been able to keep up that Bird Watchers newsletter, which he started about 20 years ago, and it's still going on quite well, and it has created a lot of interest among the lay amateur bird watchers.
Dr. Salim Ali, in the course of your ornithological work, you must have come in contact with several individuals of high stature in fields removed from ornithology, perhaps politics or business or even heads of state or monarchs and actors and actresses and film stars. Could you mention names
Film
of,
stars.
yes,
Yeah.
film stars?
Well, I think the greatest thrill I got in meeting one of these great people is when I met Gandhiji. At that time, he had not much of his Indian aura because he had just returned from Africa. This was about 1915 or so. And my brother, one of my brothers who was in the Indian Civil Service, he was a collector in Godhra district. And he was on tour, so he was a district magistrate also. So he had to try cases as he moved around the thing. And at one camp, there was a Patel of a village who had been charged with sedition or something. This was in the time of the British government in 1915. So Gandhi, who had just returned from Africa, he was called there as a witness. So he came and gave his evidence in that case in favor of the Patel. And then after the court got up, my brother brought him along to the tent to give him a cup of tea, which really meant a cup of goat's milk, which was kept ready for him, and some boiled groundnuts or whatever it was, and so on. And then it was the only time that I could have a sort of tete-a-tete with him. And I found him an extraordinarily a wonderful man because he had a fine sense of humor, which is very much lacking in most politicians and so on. In fact, he was one of those who had the real British character of being able to laugh at themselves, which I think is a very rare thing. And that was the only time I had of talking fairly intimately with him and knowing. So, of course, he was not such a great man at that time, but still he had done a lot of work for this racial thing and so on in Africa, and he was even then quite famous, and I enjoyed meeting him.
Jawaharlal Nehru is another
Yes,
individual.
he was also. I used to live in Dehradun at one time when he was living in the Dehradun jail. My landlord was the jail superintendent. He was an IMS man, and he used to bring me messages from Nehru. He said he would like to have a chat on birds and so on, and I used to go and spend some time with him and talk about birds. And he had his brother-in-law Pandit also imprisoned in the same place. So we all used to sit together and talk and so on. Through my landlord, through the superintendent, he requested for a copy of the Book of Indian Birds because he said he wanted to present it to his daughter and he wanted my autograph and so on. And Mrs. Gandhi still has that book, and she says that I got my first interest in birds from this book. And so it's a.
That's remarkable. Other political leaders in India, for instance, Morarji Desai, have you had any contact with individuals like this? Because
Yes, when Morarji Desai was the Prime Minister, I saw him and I told him that all the progress that we have been making so far is due to the support we have had from the top. So I said, how much support can we expect from you and your government? So he said, he was very reasonable, and he said that we will certainly do whatever is possible to help. But he said, what you have been doing so far is like preaching to the people who are already converted. Like, for instance, they say you have cinema shows and lectures and so on conservation, and the audience already knows that there is such a problem as conservation and so on. But he said, what have you done for the people who are actually suffering from the ravages of wildlife and so on? Have you tried to explain to them why it is necessary to preserve? He said, unless you do that and unless you can get their support, no effort will be successful. And he said, supposing there is a villager or a forest adivasi or whatever it is, who has a cow, which is his sole worldly possession, and that cow feeds his children and so on milk, and a tiger kills that cow. Then he said, how can you convince him that there is some point in preserving the tiger after that? He said, have you tried that? Unless he is convinced and he is on your side, you will never be able to save him, which was a very wise thing to say.
Did you have a response to his question that how do you convince a villager?
Yes, so he said, this is what it is, that you are talking in cities and towns to people who already know this problem. But have you tried to explain to him? So, to explain to those people, it is really a very difficult job, because my going and trying to explain to him, he will not be prepared to listen to me. It is only somebody whom he respects in his own village and to whom he is prepared to listen and who thinks that his advice is worth following and so on. Somebody who talks his own language and in the idioms and so on that he is used to. So we have not really done that. This is really the work of the panchayat people and of the people who are in the legislative council and so on in their constituency. They should try and do this. But they are so busy with their political wranglings and so on that this thing just gets passed by.
It's most unfortunate because the truth is that conservation and social reform are two sides of the same coin, particularly in a country like ours in India. It's evident to anybody who wishes to see that our people are as directly dependent on the land as the animals and birds are. So this perhaps is one of the major contributions you've made, because I think following your example there have been a host of a tribe of people who've gone out, understood the concepts, and somewhat like a multiplier effect have communicated their understanding to others.
Yes.
Thank you.